all of them back there. Oh, that's a lot, Marco. That's a lot, Marco. I think they probably think I'm going to be announcing that Marco's going to be vice president. Because that's a lot of press. That's a lot of press.
It was former President Trump kind of teasing about whether or not Senator Marco Rubio of Florida will be his running mate. That was during his rally last night in Doral, Florida. His possible VP pick, well, he also took the stage last night and, not surprisingly, delivered remarks praising Trump, blasting President Biden. Rubio is one of several Republicans confirmed to be on the former president's vice presidential shortlist. CBS News Miami reporter Jim DeFede joins us now. Jim, what do you think Marco Rubio's status is presently in the Veep Stakes competition?
The reporting I have tells me that he is still on the short list, but that there is really no way of knowing where Donald Trump is ultimately going to land. I think there were a lot of people that were hoping the former president would announce at the rally yesterday in Doral. There was a lot of anticipation that that might happen. In speaking to other Republicans here, they were kind of hoping for it. But then a few also told me at the same time that they realized that the president's campaign didn't really want to get in the way of all of Joe Biden's bad press by making a VP announcement on yesterday. So as a result, they just sort of let it dangle. Now, we know that the announcement has to come in the next few days, but we'll see. Now, the counter view to Marco being the pick is, and this is what I keep hearing more and more, is Marco too much of his own person in some ways to fit Donald Trump, what Donald Trump wants as a vice president? Does Marco Rubio's ambition lead him to be someone who Donald Trump couldn't necessarily trust as his number two? That's one of the things that you hear. But of course, you hear it sometimes from folks from other camps who want to spell that out and sort of put that out there. But that's certainly something of interest.
Jim, you are as read in as any reporter in Florida on the history of Florida political figures, those who have worked around them and with them and watched them rise. There's an interesting Venn diagram that overlays between the Trump campaign and Marco Rubio, specifically with Susie Wiles and Tony Fabrizio, correct?
Absolutely. You know, you've got particularly Susie Wiles is a big Marco Rubio fan, big Marco Rubio supporter, was involved with Marco from her early days here in Florida. And that is certainly, if Marco Rubio ends up getting picked, Susie Wiles is likely one of the strong reasons for. Now, of course, you know, I know that there is the question of, can you have Donald Trump and Marco Rubio both from the state of Florida? And is, I think, our general understanding of the way the Constitution works on that is it wouldn't prevent him from picking Marco Rubio. But if Marco Rubio maintains his residency here in Florida, he would have to, well, Donald Trump would lose access to the 30 electoral votes. Florida's electors wouldn't be able to vote for both men. But that's an easy fix. And one of the easy fixes, and Donald Trump seemed to suggest that it wasn't really going to be a problem, is Marco Rubio's history. You just had a segment where you talked about states that are now leading Republican. One of those is Nevada. Marco Rubio has a long history in Nevada. Marco Rubio, when he was about 8 years old, his entire family, because they were out of work here in Miami after immigrating from Cuba, moved to Las Vegas. His mom worked as a maid for a hotel maid on the Strip. His father was a bartender at one of the casinos. You know, Marco Rubio was actually baptized a Mormon, little known fact, during his time in Nevada. Now, of course, when they came back to South Florida, he went back to the Roman Catholic Church. But for a time, Marco Rubio was a Mormon. You know, he was there from about roughly the age of 8 to 14. And so he has a lot of cousins. He has other family there. And that Hispanic vote in Nevada, if you basically take Marco Rubio and plop him in Las Vegas, and basically he camps out there and works Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada, that could make strong political sense. That's what Marco Rubio, I think, has going for him more than anything else right now.
And, Jim, also word today that Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, has been, quote unquote, added to the Republican National Committee speaking schedule next week.
Yeah, I'm sure it was just an oversight that his name wasn't on the original list. But that's another interesting dynamic with the Rubio part of it. Because if you think about it, if Marco Rubio has to leave the state of Florida and, let's say, go to Nevada or go somewhere else, then it's an open Senate seat. And who does Donald Trump hand the ability to give a Senate seat to? He hands it to Ron DeSantis. Does he want to give Ron DeSantis the power to pick the next senator from Florida as well? There's so much triangulation here. It's fascinating, but obviously in a few days, by Monday, we'll know for sure who he's picking for VP. But no, we're all going to be paying attention to Ron DeSantis' speech at the convention. I'm sure it'll be lively, and Donald Trump will probably watch and go, yeah, I beat that guy. Yeah, so, whether or not he wants to crown him the future of the party, I'm not sure Donald Trump is ready to give that title over to Ron DeSantis just yet.
As you mentioned, Jim DeFede, lots of triangulation. Meanwhile, Donald Trump Jr. keeps telling his dad, very simple with J.D. Vance, Dad, real simple. Jim DeFede in Florida, thanks so very much. Our American Decides team will have special coverage of the Republican National Convention next Monday through Thursday, starting at 5 p.m. Eastern. Stay with us all night and all week long.